Got it.
Sometimes that white, and looking at that for too long hurts me too. So far, I'm doing good.
All right. Let's go. Boop, boop. All right, here we go. Here we go. Okay. All right, here we are. We are live. We are tonight going to go over the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, many times, many things that we look at today, we have to go over what the scriptures are saying. If we're not careful, we miss so much. There's been so much going on. And it ain't just what's been going on. It's been what the translations have been. It's been what men have done. That, you know, a lot of people say that the Bible is infallible and it can't be changed, but we read in Revelations that it can be changed. So what I would like to go over tonight is the Dead Sea Scrolls. What is the point of the Dead Sea Scrolls? So maybe we can answer some of those questions. Maybe we can go over what is the point? What's it matter? You know, because a lot of people will say, well, I would submit to you that the reason for the Dead Sea Scrolls and the reason why they was found in 47, 50, all the way up till 2000, after 2000, is the validity of the scriptures herself. If we have something, and Yahweh knows, that's the thing we got to really get behind and understand, that Yahweh knows what we're going to do. Yahweh knows that when we get, you know, with different things, and we can ask Siri and we can ask this, we can ask this, before you know it, we think we're smarter than what we are. So when we get smarter than what we think we are, well, comes the question of, well, what are we doing here? What's going on? Did man really write the Bible? Did the Romans write the Bible? Who wrote the Bible? If you're not careful, 4,000 years, 5,000 years, 2,000 years later, it almost could be a question, especially for people who doubt and don't believe, right? A doubting Thomas, a doubting person that just, and it ain't really so much even doubt in some cases. I don't want to get it too wrong, but when you have the enemy forever saying that this is what it is, and this is what you live on, and this is the way it looks, and this is what we tell you, eventually, especially without doing any math or any research or checking, you're going to just say, well, this is that, because that's what they told me, right? So I would submit to you that the reason why the find of the Dead Sea Scrolls at such a time as this, and when they found them, was to shatter that evidence, if you will, to shatter that and make it more valid. So we're going to go over some of the things of the Dead Sea Scrolls, some of the things that it talks about, and some of the things that we can find about it. So since the early 1950s, information from the scrolls and Corman's archaeology remains has been combined by experts to form a persuasive portrayal of people to which they allude. Yet all the advances made in knowledge and understanding the enigma of Sek is by no means definitely solved. So it's in from the Essenes, from Qumran, right? I mean, we know, we can see where that's at. We know what it looks like. We have maps of that place. So the first thing is what we have to find. We have to understand is there was 15,000 pieces of these scrolls made. 15,000 that they found. 530 was complete scrolls and 250 more pieces, right? So they probably lived there. They probably had a place there. You don't make 15,000 anythings without being there, right? Now, the thing about this, how do we get to this? Well, if we use what we have and we use the Torah itself, then we know that every king, every in charge, king, particularly leader, is supposed to make a copy of this, right? So when you make a copy of the scrolls, and some was said to make 5 copies, what are you going to do? So it doesn't take a whole lot of time for these people to be making copies of the scrolls for this to add up, right? So you have one guy makes 5, another guy makes 5, his son, and so on and so forth, that they keep going until they got that many on YouTube. Okay, so we'll have question and comments at the end, but what we're going to talk about again is, I believe what I would submit is the validity of the actual scriptures of the Bible that we have been handed down. And we see this very clearly in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And not only do we see that, they had Tobit, they had Psalms, they had the Apocrypha books in them, right? So people say, well, they try to validate books of the Bible. They try to validate and say what goes in and what doesn't. But I would submit to you that Yahweh and Yeshua are the only ones, and through the Ruach are the only ones for us to say, well, I can take this part out, I can take that part out, because as we've seen, if you take out any named thing, right? If you take out quail, if you take out cow, if you take out honey, if you take any of these things out, then that's what you get. You get something that you don't know what you're looking at. So I would say this is the whole point of what the Dead Sea Scrolls have to offer and why they was found, because when we have that validity, if we have that, we can show it, right? It's like putting a book here and a book here. We have the Bible, we lay the Bible down. This one says the same thing, and it's from back behind the time of Yeshua, back behind that time. So we know they're valid scripts. We know that people, people don't just write things for hardly no reason, right? You don't just write things and say, well, I'm just going to make things up and keep writing them down. And what's the point? So they're writing them down because I believe, even further looking into it, that they was sent of the Creator, and these was the hidden things, just like we see in Enoch, we see Elijah, we see that it talks of a time to come. These books are not for you. So if this was handed down to Enoch, to, somebody next in line there, that it's still not for them. Even though Noah had them in his hands, even Noah might have even thought, which he probably didn't, with Elohim, but a lot of these people, if they're walking with the Creator, they know what the Creator's talking about. They know what he's doing. So if he inspired all of them, then wouldn't he inspire these people to hide these? And maybe there's more, maybe if Yahweh tarries, we will find something in another region or a different place. So with all that being said, that again, we have 15,000 pieces, 530 scrolls, 250 pieces. These are not something just, they was a hobby to them, right? And then when we take them apart, we can match. We're just going to go over what this, probably to 100 or whatever we can get to, about an hour. But we're going to go back and forth with scriptures and the Dead Sea Scrolls. And some of these Dead Sea Scrolls clearly have scriptures in them, right? So we're not going to bother other than the discrepancies of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to what does this match? So we already know Genesis, Bereshit, Deuteronomy. I mean, there's whole side by side. And there's a thing I believe in Denver until the beginning of the year. I don't know if that's still valid or not, but you can actually go and look at these. So let's start off here. The 12 chief priests shall minister at the daily sacrifice before Elohim. Below them shall be the chiefs of the Levites to the number of 12, one for each tribe. Below them shall be the chief of the tribes. And this is actually what they numbered them. 1 QM 11, 1 through 3, 1-3. So they numbered them all of what they did, right? So that's where we get like the Dead Sea Scrolls and the different fragments in the different places there. The longest one was 28 feet long, 28 feet now. And it was the temple scroll, which said what to have in the temple scroll, what not to have in the temple scroll. So what we have to understand here before we go any farther is this says the God. This talks about, so we know the Dead Sea Scrolls did not have these in them. If you look at the Dead Sea Scrolls themselves, they was written in Hebrew. Hebrew was the original language. Paleo-Hebrew, Hebrew, modern Hebrew, then Greek, and then, right? So almost every one of these was written in Hebrew. There was even a letter found that was in Greek that the guy was apologizing because he couldn't find a Hebrew scribe to scribe this letter to someone who was actually Greek. And he's apologizing that he had to use this because obviously he couldn't find anybody around at the time to write it in Hebrew, and he needed to write this Greek letter. So that says a whole lot right there that he was apologizing, writing to a Greek, right? In Greek instead of the Hebrew. So they used a lot of Hebrew and a lot of Aramaic. I will pay no man to reward of evil. I will pursue him with goodness for judgment of all the living with Elohim. And it is he who will render to man his reward. When we go through a lot of these, again, the way to validate it, does it say what the scriptures say? Or is it saying a completely different doctrine? A lot of these things we see Yeshua talking about light. They were known as the Ben of Light, the Bene of Orb is what was in these, right? So again, be calling a Christian, most of what they called the people was the sons of light, or the Bene or Ben of Light, Orb being the light, right? This is the actual wording in the Dead Sea Scrolls of what they penned, what they put down. So I will pay to no man the reward of evil. I will pursue him with goodness, for judgment of all the living is with Elohim, and it is he who will render to man his reward. So again, it's all about the same story. It's Yahweh's going to give you reward. You're going to get it if you do the right thing. If not, what do you expect? They were to be truthful, humble, just, upright, charitable, and modest. They to watch in community for a third of every night of the year, to read the book and to study the law and to bless together. These people, a lot of people say what is extreme, but I believe they was just trying to figure, they was trying to live right. They was trying to do right. They was trying to do what they was supposed to do. And could you imagine having a community today that we could get together and read the law and agree on it? Now, it's also said that they was strict, which we know nothing of today, but they was strict that you didn't speak out of turn. If the elder, if the person was speaking, then he said his piece, he said his words, and they didn't say anything until after. Then the midrash, then they could talk about it. And we see Yeshua doing the same thing, right? He got up and said, and he basically read Isaiah. And when he got done, He said, behold, the Ruach of Yahweh is upon me. He has sent me to set free the prisoner, and on and on and on, right? And when he got done, he said, today this has been what? Fulfilled in your ears, fulfilled in your sight. That's when they lost their mind. When he was reading it, nobody said anything. The respect, the same thing that we see is what they did, is what he did. And it wasn't until he, he could have said that in the beginning, could he not? Yeshua could have got up and said, this is going to be fulfilled as soon as I'm finished reading it. Now deal with that. But he didn't. He read the scripture. He read the text. Nobody obviously had a problem with that until he said, this is me, basically, paraphrasing. This is me. This is what, behold, Yahweh has sent me. The spirit of the Ruach of Yahweh is upon me. And when he told them that was him and that was who he was, that's when they lost their mind. So community, in their hands lay the ultimate responsibility for decisions on matters, doctrine, discipline, purity, and impurity, and in particular, everything pertaining to justice. They had justice, and I would believe it's probably more justice than what we have today. If somebody did something, they judged them properly. It was also a basic rule of the order that a priest was required to be present at any gathering of 10 or more members who were meeting or for debate. Why? Because what do we see today? People debate things and it's unruly. They cuss, holler. I mean, the biggest thing anymore, I guess, is just say you're stupid, right? If you're debating something, just say that's stupid, and you lose because you were just stupid. But that's not the way this works. It's not the way it's supposed to work. That's the worldly way of doing things, and they didn't do things that way. They did it, I would say, to the utmost respectful for everybody, because there's nothing wrong with asking a question, right? Truly, there's nothing wrong with saying, I just don't know. I'm uninformed. I don't get it. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you explain and say, well, this is what that is, and people say, no, it's not, you're just stupid, that's uncalled for. And obviously, they would have dealt with that accordingly. It was also a basic rule of order that the priest was required to present at any gathering of 10 or more members who were meeting for debate, Bible study, or prayer. A priest was to recite the grace before the common meals and pronounce blessings. He was no doubt the man whose duty it was to study the law continually. One interesting feature of the priesthood at Corman is that their presence was absolute. In Judaism, represented by the Musna, the priest and superior Levite, the Levite to the Israelite, and the Israelite to the Halarat. But the priestly procedure is conditional, and if a man of learning, we are told, the high priest, uneducated, poor, and we're not going to say that 3 times, but, precedes the high priest, because what they was considered and what everything before them was considered is exactly what it says. They was a bastard child. They was a heathen. They was, it might sound like a bad thing, but it's really what they was considered as if you didn't follow Torah, if you didn't follow Yahweh, if you didn't follow the Creator and on his terms, you considered just a pagan dog. You was just, a dog could be sent more worthy because a dog will listen, right? That's the concept of a dog. You tell him set and he sets. You tell him come here, he comes here. You tell him, to lay down and stay, and he stays. Where their concept of this was they're just disobedient. They won't listen to anything. They're ungodly. They're unworthy, which makes sense if you keep the right open mind concept of it. The highest office was vested in the person of the guardian, known also, it would seem, as the master, the maskil. The community was to be taught by him how to live in conformity with the book of the community rule. And yes, they have books, they have scrolls of the community rule. And I would say this is probably where a lot of people get this, I want to live in a community. I want to be a part of a community, right? I want to do community things. So that is what they're getting. They're making this a community and saying, this is how we live here, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, because we know in today we have not really communities, but we have towns and cities, and you have laws in those towns and cities. Now you have rule breakers and you have all these different things, but it's all the same thing. There's nothing new. Everything that we've got for some reason is straight from old days. And for some reason we think we're smarter than they was, but that's not really how I see it. I see it that we are not as righteous as they were. I'll just put it that way. So he was to proceed over the assemblies, giving leave to speak to those wishing to do so. He was to assess in concert in the brethren the spiritual progress, the men of his charge, and rank them accordingly. So, he did what a leader does. That's all it's really saying, that he would tell them where they fit, how they did, what they would do, when they should speak. Hey, I want you to have a sermon next week. Hey, I want you to get this. You need to get the trash out, whatever needed to be done. But he was in charge of it. Now we see Moshe under the same authority, if you will. Everybody was under Moshe. Now, the problem becomes, why was these people in this setting instead of the Jerusalem setting? And if you look at the map, it's not that far away from Jerusalem. But according to scholars' books and things of that nature, they got fed up with the Pharisees. They actually had the Zodok or the Melchizedek reign of the priesthood, right? The Melchizedek, some say. So they had that reign of the priesthood, which stems from Yeshua. Yeshua, the high priest of Shalom, is who we're talking about. He has no, it's the same thing as Yahweh almost. There is no ending, there is no beginning. He was there, he's always going to be there. Who can counsel him? So all these scriptures talking about, we can clearly see what they're talking about. The problem becomes, what I was saying is, they started doing things that they shouldn't have been doing, right? And we see that with Yeshua. If we would take what they being the Essenes, the Dead Sea Scroll people, those at Corman, those and others like them had a problem with the Pharisees, with the Sadducees. But guess what? If you look at it, it's kind of the same as what we see with a lot of churches of today. Your Sunday church is hand in hand with the government, right? The Sunday church shuts down because the government says, do this, and they do that. We've seen it clearly. We've seen they are hand in hand, and they are doing things that they ought not do according to Scripture. But, so what do? Come out of her, my people. Come out. We're coming out of that Babylon, that system, that what they've started. Most people, that's why a lot of Hebrew roots, the way, and this is where the way comes from. They were known as people of the way, or again, the men of the orb, the sons of lights. In the council of the community, there shall be 12 men. Now, hold up. Where else do we find 12 men? How does this match up to our scriptures? Yeshua picked how many men? So would Yeshua possibly be going off of what they was doing? That's why he picked the 12 men he picked. He did the things that he did. Let's read. In the council of the community, there shall be 12 men and 3 priests. The 3 priests was the overseeing of all. And some say that's why we hear about Peter, Paul. We hear about them more than the rest of them. Well, what about the rest of them? We hear Peter, Paul, we hear John, and then we don't hear so much. So the ones over everything, and maybe that's the way that he put it together. Perfectly used in all that it is revealed of the law, whose work shall be truth, righteousness, justice, loving kindness, and humility. These are what we see the opposite of with the Pharisees, do we not? He came to the Pharisees and he said, there ain't much he didn't call them. Vipers, den of thieves. He pretty much, in today's world, if you went to the church and said that because they were selling CDs in the back row, you'd probably be asked to leave, right? If you went into the local Sunday church and they're selling pies and cakes and peanut brittle, and you said, "You den of vipers, you house of sin," they would probably escort you to the door, if not call the law on you and make sure that you do not come back. But how has it become in just 2,000 years? Not even a whole 2,000 years. If you put the dates together, 32, 33, it's not even yet 2,000 years from when they was doing that to what we got going on today. So let's go forward. They shall preserve the faith in the land with steadfastness and meekness, and shall atone for sin by the practice of justice and by suffering the sorrows of affliction. Now, this is a total 180 out from churchianity. This is a total 180 from, I'm just gonna, say I'm sorry and live with my sin and be a pig in slop, and I can just hose it off later. That's not what this is talking about. This is not the way that they live. This is a total different way that do not sin, do not practice sin, therefore practice justice, suffering the sorrows of affliction. If you have to be sorrowful, if you have to do something and you don't like it, then take the sorrowful affliction, right? If you have to eat something, then smack your hand by all means and don't partake of that. If you know it's sinful, if you know it's not right, then go ahead and hurt your own feelings before somebody else finds out, right? Because obviously they didn't have problems with correcting, just like Yeshua, just like Yochanan. They obviously didn't have problems with the correction of people, because why? Correction is life. Correction leads to actually love. They shall walk with all men according to the standard of truth and the rule of the time. So all this, well, we live in this day and I got to do what the government says. No, that ain't what that says whatsoever. It says you do what the scripture says, you do what the Torah says. I know a lot of people come to me and said, well, we have to do what they're doing because the government rules and I have to live under the government. No, that don't say this at all. Most of the scriptures it's talking about is talking about Yahweh's government, nothing to do with any other government. He never bowed down before Caesar. He never bowed down before other men. He said, don't bow before any man. The 3 priests and the 12 men are referred to, also the 15 men in the hybrid version of the community rule and the Damascus document, 4Q265, fragment 7. Their presence was obviously essential. Both documents state that when they are in Israel, the council of the community shall be established in truth. But wherever they form the nucleus of the sect as a whole, or the minimum cornium, or the leadership of the community, symbolically portrayed as consisting of the 12 tribes, and the 3 Levitical clans are a special elite within the council designed elsewhere, the foundations of the community. Now, why do you think we talk about something Levitical in there? Because they were Levitical priests. Some were Levitical priests. Yochanan was Levitical priest. So some say that Yochanan probably should have been the priest at the temple. But because of the way it was created, I believe, the way that he made it, it wasn't a surprise. He made it this way because where did Yochanan go? Think about it. They was how much apart from each other. So when they was looking for Yeshua to kill him, Yeshua left. We know he left. But what happened to Yochanan? Some say Yochanan, and I believe it's written that his dad was killed to protect him, and his mother ran off and took him to the wilderness. And the scriptures itself says he is from the wilderness, right? Where do these people live? In the wilderness. So maybe, just maybe, that Levitical priesthood that they was talking about, he would very easily be accepted. He would very easily be taken away, right? They would accepted him knowing who he was. They would have accepted him quickly, I believe. So it was to debate the law, to discuss their current business, to select or reject newcomers, there we go, under the guidance of the guardian, to hear changes against offenders, and to conduct a yearly inquiry into the process of every sect. So promoting or demoting them in rank. Yep, that's right. Just like a military thing, promoting or demoted. You did something wrong, you get your rank. We ain't going to have it. Well, that guy's been here. Doesn't matter how long you've been here. Don't matter if he's brand new. The same thing that I was saying there. If Yochanan came there and he did all the thing and he was Levitical, guess where he went? Straight up the ranks. And if you look at the map again, it says he came from the wilderness and he was immersing, he was baptizing. It's not far, and the river's there. I mean, it's not that far from Haran to Jerusalem if you look on the map. So it wouldn't be, nothing, surprise that he may even stayed with them. And even the disciples, some say and claim that the disciples, well, how do you know that? Why would you say that? Where can you even get something like that? Well, when Yeshua said, take no more than 2 tunics, take more than 2, what was he saying? Who else did this? These Essenes didn't let you bring in your suitcases. The community rules, they can't break them for you or somebody else, Yochanan, or the community rules would be what? You get your tunic and you get your shovel. Your shovels for going to the bathroom, the rest we supply. Now you see where Yeshua would be talking about the same exact thing, because they are supposed to take care of you. The same thing that we see today. You're supposed to be taken care of when you go these places. Instead, in most cases, it's not, especially as a truther. Now, the churches, if you get into their UPC world organization, which that even sounds horrible to me, but when you get into, whatever organization they are called, right? The apostolic, and there's big ones, and there's global, and then there's smaller ones, and they got like a circuit little thing that they run. Well, if you get in on that, usually that you still bring your clothes, you bring your stuff, all they do is give you a salary for showing up. But that's not like what they're doing here. What they're doing here is, you're going to come here, you're going to live like us, talk like us, walk like us, or we don't want you here. And if you ain't from here, we heard what they feel about you, if you ain't from here. So I believe that's where a lot of that nastiness comes from, that people go to church and they think, well, you ain't in this church, you're going to hell, because, that same type of, well, it's a different attitude. I'm going to say it's the same attitude, but, it's kind of that same notion. I would say that if you ain't here, then you ain't, you ain't a member and all that. So during their seasons, the older and the quiet were to prevail. A person wishing to offer his opinion or ask a question was to crave permission in a prescribed way. He was to rise and tell the guardian of the congregation, I have something to say to the congregation, and then wait for their consent before going ahead. So all in order, and it's spoken of, it's written that what are we supposed to do? Line by line, precept by precept, right? The procedure followed in inquiries and in fragments of the law and the sex rule has been preserved in all the list of faults with their corresponding senses. Tells us more about the mentality of the Dead Sea. It tells us exactly what they was doing and what they was saying. If we read the scrolls, read the books, we can get a pretty good idea of what they was talking about. So then we have any transgression. What is transgression? Transgression, according to scripture, is breaking the law, right? So the same things that we see that they was doing there, if you break the law, and we have to understand for a lot of the New Age church or the new generation or whoever may be, they didn't have the New Testament as we have the New Testament. And that's why a lot of times when they was speaking of something, they was directing you back to the commandments, back to Moshe. Well, I ain't going to go back to Moshe. Well, you kind of got to go back to Moshe if you want to know something, right? You have to go back to the text and read the text, or you don't know. If you don't read about history, if you don't read about Germany, then here comes Hitler again, and he's going to pull the same thing again if you don't know what's going on. Now, these are facts more than what we, can probably grasp of a lot of what's happening in the world. One word of the law of Moses at any point earned outright expulsion. What? One word of the law of Moses on any point. So no former companion might from then on associate with the sinner in any way. Expulsion follows, secondly, the pronouncement for any reason, whatever, of the divine name. So if you went and did something during a service, you was booted out. And you was booted out, and, they didn't really take a lot of stuff like we see today. It's a no-nonsense way. But in a lot of cases, it should be a no-nonsense way because we're talking about eternity. We're not talking about having your oil change in your car. We ain't talking about having a flat tire. I mean, it's your eternity. I think that we should take it more serious. I think that churches should take it more serious. This lollygag playing, I'm saved and it's okay and everything's all right. It's not okay and it's not all right. And we know it's not. When you leave that building, you know everything ain't all right. So why act like it's all right? If any man has uttered the name, even though frivolously or as a result of shock, for any other reason, whether reading the book or the blessing, he shall be dismissed and shall return no more. So they ousted them for this. Now, this is where we start seeing a little bit of going the other way with it, right? But we also see a lot of that in Judaism. That's where they say Hashem instead of the name. And they say the name is too valuable to be pronounced. And you can see this to a point because when we go somewhere and we tell somebody his name, then they can profane it. You see what I'm saying? So when you share that name, and you're open up a door that if you're not careful, somebody can do something with. There's people on the YouTube right now, probably don't belong on the YouTube right now. There's people saying stuff about his name that they are going to regret, that it may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, but you don't this is not, even though we know it, even though we cherish it, it's not something to just throw out. It's not something to debate. That's why I think a lot of us anymore, if you say it that way, then that's on you. You say it, but we know and we can see what's written on stone, and this is the way we pronounce, and this is what we do, right? So we have to be very careful and I think that's where a lot of people kick people out of their community, of their congregation or whatever, because I think they read into these things and they think they have the right to do that. So, I mean, if somebody's being blasphemous, if they're being ignorant, if they're just being stupid, if you will, but, I can see putting them out or getting rid of them or dropping them down. But if they don't know, but that's what the whole teaching is about, right? That's what all this is really about, is teaching and telling people and knowing them. Don't murmur against the Creator. You don't, to let someone know you're not talking to me, you're talking about him. And there's a difference, when you're directing it to me, say what you will, so to speak. But you have to watch that too, because then are you speaking about the prophet? Are you speaking about the fleshly person? So, there's correction and then there's nonsense and things that we say that we don't want to be held against for talking about the Creator. Whoever has murmured against authority of the community shall be expelled and shall not return. This was not 3 times you're out, 3 strikes, the good old ball game thing. This is you're done. And in some cases, I know a lot of people say, well, man, but in some cases they did it for a reason. There's some people, they're never going to change. They're always going to be argumentative, and that's all you're going to deal with. And how long are you going to put up with it? And then somebody else is going to argue, and then somebody else. Or you know what? You got 5 people arguing, and ain't nobody learning nothing. It just becomes a catastrophe. Lastly, where a man had been a member of the council for at least 10 years and had been defected to walk in the stubbornness of his heart, not only was he to be expelled, but the same judgment that was extended to any of his former colleagues who might take pity on him and share with him their food or money. Wow. Even if you was there 10 years and you was a good old member, if you're going to walk in the stubbornness of your heart, but that gets rid of what we see a lot of times, I've been doing this so long, you see pastors doing it all the time. I've been doing this for 40 years, like that matters. If you've been doing something for 40 years, you should be really good at it. You should know what the scriptures say. You should be keeping the Sabbath. You should be, it's amazing these people use that as a ploy or a tool or something that, that matters, but yet I've been to places and they haven't grown in 10 years. They haven't grown in 5. There's no growth whatsoever. And that's a sad thing. Lying in matters of property, in all property of potential concealment of personal possessions, earned exclusive from purity for a year, and cut 1/4 of the food of the ration. Wow. How'd you like that? You're going to lie about your land? You're going to talk about your land? You're going to say your land and you own more? Well, we're going to cut your food out. How you like that? The penal code, 4Q 265. Boy, if we had that kind of stuff today, the farmers wouldn't be plowing to the edges of the roads, would they? After lying deliberately and similarly, deceiving by word or deed, for bearing malice injustice, for taking revenge, for murmuring against a companion unjustly, and also for going naked before his companion without having been obliged to do so. A curious provision. The secretary was to atone for 6 months for failing to care for a companion, and for speaking foolishly 3 months. For falling asleep. Hello, you better wake up. For falling asleep during a meeting of council, for leaving the council while members were standing in prayer, for spitting in the council, for golf away foolishly, for being so poorly dressed that when drawing his hand from beneath his garment, his nakedness has been seen. 30 days. That's some pretty good stuff there, You do some of these things in 30 days, you're going to have no more falling asleep for you. No more, I forgot, didn't put my tunic undies on, you're going to you're going to remember. The penal code contained in another of the K4 manuscripts, the Damascus document, 4Q 266, mentioned also 10 days. 10 days. In addition to the 30 days expulsion inflicted on someone who has fallen asleep during a meeting. You know why? Because there's nothing more aggravating than be talking and giving and doing something and watching somebody sleeping while you're trying to save their soul. So, we've all seen it, and usually it's with kids. Sometimes it's older people. But if you ain't got the gumption to stay awake for what your soul is being delivered and prayed for and all these things, then, why'd you come to the meeting? Why are you here? What are you doing? We see a lot of times we go to church and people are just nodded out, but it's your eternity. It's your soul. It's your education. And for some reason, the flesh can go watch Mickey Mouse jump up and down and all these things we all see. We can contain our flesh because it's happy while we're watching squirrels fly out of trees. But for some reason, we can't keep our eyes awake. We can't keep our, and it is, as it really is when you're trying to deliver a message. You can see that when somebody's over there nodding out and you try to make jokes and make fun. What I like to do is just get one of them little ping pong guns and just shoot at people. Oh, I'm just kidding. Boop, boop, boop. Grandpa's like, oh. All right. You got to throw some fun into it, right? So the expulsion, and they basically kicked him out. They got in trouble for leaving the assembly 3 times within reason, for interrupting another while speaking with the left hand. 10 days. A fascinating fragment that has been preserved in the cases of misbehaved Jochanan, son of short-tempered Ananias, led astray the spirit of the community and either pampered himself or showed favoritism to his near kin. And another, Ananias, son of Simon, loved something no doubt prohibited. That the common table was of high importance to Roman daily life is evidence from the fact that only the fully professed and the faultless, that is to say, those who were inscribed for purity and not subsequently disqualified, were allowed to sit at it. This is no explicit mention of a ritual bath preceding the meals, but the various references to purification by water, as well as the presence of bathing installations at Quarman. It is likely that the secretaries immersed themselves before eating, as did the Essenes, according to Josephus, War 11:129. But little more is learnt of the meal itself from the community rule than that when the table had been prepared for eating and the new wine for drinking, the priest was to be the first to bless the food and drink. The implication would be that after him, the others did the same, an influence supported by the Messianic rule, where a similar meal is described attended by 2 messiahs. So they believed, now here's where it gets very interesting. They believed in 2 messiahs. Now, a lot of people take that different ways, but we'll read the rest of this and we'll go on. Some uncertainty surrounds the meaning of new wine, but it would seem that the use in the scrolls, with the exception of the temple scroll, of the eternity Hebrew words for wine, Tyrish or Yayin, that the latter often was projective conjunctions. More likely than not, wine drunk by the secretaries, the drink of the congregation, was unfermented grape juice. So again, knowing the Levites and the Nazarene, or the ones from Nazareth, could not partake of this. So this is where we come to a part that, was they really drinking wine? Because a lot of times when it talks about wine, it's just talking about grape juice, orange juice. It could be any type of juice. And this also is backed up with scriptures, because it says not to drink the fermented wine, that its bite is a viper. So a lot of these things that we see, we have to be careful with, because, people say, well, look, they had wine, they was doing this and all that. But we have to know, does the scripture match up? Does it fit up or not? Now, going back to the 2 messiahs. In scripture, isn't it funny that they come and they ask Yeshua, are you the one? Now think about this. We talked earlier, was Jochanan brought here by his mother? Where did they take him in? Did they take Jochanan in? Because Jochanan was wearing what? And please don't say he's wearing a camel and a belt and drinking all this, because we'll go to the scriptures real quick to get that out. But you shall not eat of those that chew the cud, or those that have split hoofs, the cloven one, the camel. It specifically says the camel. So I don't know which of the 21 councils changed that. Probably need to look into it. But one of them changed that to camel's hair. But he was probably wearing, what they wore was linen or goats. they're goats is what all these scrolls was written on, was goats skin. So it's very likely that he could have been wearing a goat skin when he left out. So it was probably more than likely that he was actually wearing a goat skin garment with a belt. So as we see here, because if he showed his nakedness, then that was considered a sin, just like modesty, which we know nothing of today. But with all that being said, that if he was wearing a goat skin and they did eat locusts, then it's, is it a far jump to say that this happened? And then we see they came to Yeshua and they asked him, "Are you the Messiah, or shall we seek another?" It goes along with the two Messiahs. And I don't believe it's the two Messiahs, so to speak, where a lot of people, I think what they were saying is they knew it was prophesied the Messiah is coming, and then they knew the Messiah is coming back. So there is two Messiahs. It's just the one is going to come and lay down his life and be the Lamb. How did Yochanan know this? Behold, the Lamb of Elohim, right? He obviously knew the scripture. He knew the Torah. He knew the prophets. And he said, "Behold the Lamb." I believe that was also probably inspired, behold the Lamb. So, but this is directly showing, I believe, that when they come, that it was probably one of them that came and asked, "Are you the Messiah or not?" And what did he say? Why would he say, if Yochanan wasn't a part of this group or lived around them or was in close vicinity to them, why would he tell them, "Go tell Yochanan, go tell him that I am"? Why would he say that? Because with a lot of other people, he said what? He told them parables. "Who do you say that I am?" Right? "Well, you're the son, you're the Ben of the living God, you're the B'nai of Yahweh." "Well, who revealed that to you?" So you see all the, all the inside of what's going on there. So we'll go a little bit further. Another topic to be considered under the heading of commercial life and institutions is a crucial one of induction into the sect. And if you should seem strange to place it towards the end rather than the beginning, the explanation is that with an idea, however sketchy, of what was entailed by adherence to the movement, the process which admitted a Jew into its company becomes easier to follow. According to the regime adopted at Qumran, a person desiring to join the sect remained on probation, certainly for 2 years and possibly for 3 or more. So this wasn't just something you entered into out of a whim, and they didn't want you to enter in out of a whim. And it's another contradiction we see between churchianity and a true movement, if you will. Churchianity accepts everybody anyway. Well, here we go, let's go. And churchianity 3 years later, you don't see a person there that used to be there in a lot of cases, as far as newbies. You have your foundational people, your people that live there, the families that go there. But a newbie coming in is a newbie going out if you're not careful, because there's no foundation. They don't have what they was presenting, So a lot of these things that was there, I believe is wholesome and good. I believe that we should have more, we should study more, we should learn more from what they did. His first move was to appear before the guardian at the head of the congregation, meaning no doubt during a session of a congregation, who inquired into his principles to discover if it was a suitable, if he wanted to be there, right? Does he want to be there? This is the way it is. It ain't a "I'm sorry" type doctrine. It's, do you want to do this? And do we want to accept you? There's a two-way street here. They're both one-way street, but it's a two-way lane, right? Do you want to be a part of this? Yes, I do. Okay, well, we're going to watch what you do and see how you do. It's really what life is about, to be honest. It's more of what our life is, more than a lot of churchianity picks it out to be. Churchianity says you're sorry, you're accepted, you're a member, but that's mainly for tithes and money. But the truth of the matter, if you don't follow what the scriptures say, you can be a member and signed and you know, they can call you whatever, but it doesn't help your eternal. They, I believe, are trying to help your eternal. Obviously, they wasn't in it for the money. If they were satisfied, he entered the covenant. That is to say, he solemnly swore there and then to adhere to the Torah as the same sect of the vowing. Now, some people say that they didn't accept vows, they didn't take vows, but they was actually admitting that they would, which, you know, however you look at that, but, you know, they was actually entering a type of covenant, whether it was a vow or a covenant, signed, verbal, however, because a lot of people say, and I believe even some of the documents say, not to take an oath or not to take a vow. Because as you've seen, even 10 years later, now you're a liar. So they don't want, they're trying their best not to make you a liar. They're trying not to make you, even on paper and documentation, a covenant breaker. So, you know, the best thing to do with that, instead of somebody 10 years later going, I got the scroll where you said, you know, just banish them and be done with them. You ain't got to ridicule and do any more than has to be done. You just get rid of them. By binding an oath to return with all his heart and with his soul to every commandment of the law of Moshe, accordance with all that has been revealed to the sons of Zadok, the keepers of the covenant. So, again, you know, I'm going to tell you both ways because I've heard both ways. Some people say that they're scrolls and they say that they didn't keep an oath, that it was more of a verbal, but it was a covenant, not an oath, because they didn't take oaths. So with all that being said, you know, they're making a covenant, an oath, a swearing in, different than I will, I do. You know, you make a marriage covenant. It's a I do, I will, as opposed to you swear, you swear on this and you swear on that and all that. So let's go a little further. After a further period of unspecified length, during which he received instruction from the guardian and all the rules of the community, he appeared once more before the congregation, who confirmed him as a novice or dismissed him. So everybody there has a right to say, you're a rookie and you're just doing this for, you know, whatever reason, or we believe you're a truther. You belong with us. But although he was now accepted into the council of the community, he was nevertheless still not admitted to purify for another full year. The same rule applied also to the group represented in 4Q 265 fragment 1. This concept of pure things, the purity and the purities, it needs some comment, right? So what are they purifying? They're purifying themselves. They're purifying, you know, everything that needs to be purified, if you will. And that's a whole lot of things. The plates.
You do? Yeah, I know.
All the things that they did, all the things that they had to purify.
I think this place would be the one to work at.
And especially,
It's pretty good. Oh,
That's
I'm
really old
sorry.
school.
I'm in Zoom and I'm talking. Sorry.
So the concept to purify things, you know, they purified their bodies, they purified themselves before they came on there, right? So before they would go in, like we went over before, they would purify, they would wash, and it said in cold water, they would purify. So they wasn't a group of, like we see today, of me type things, right? I want to wash my body, but I got to make sure it's hot water, got to make sure it's the purity as opposed to what I need, what I want type thing, if that makes sense. So it needs some comment. It seems to designate here in the rabbinic literature ritual that pure food, as well as the vessels and the utensils in which they contained or cooked, it includes also garments. That another thing we can bring up here, that they had great big stone things, because the Torah says if someone touches a bowl, touches this, touches that, and they're unclean, then it's unclean. You have to wash the vessel, you have to put it away until evening. And depending on what it is, where it's been, all that. So the architects found these huge stones and these huge things that they had with water in them. And their whole point was they would put water in it because women in their menstrual cycle, if they came in, then they made the place unclean. Right? So how do you unclean water? How do you make water? You have to dump it out. You have to go all the way back down. You have to get some more water. So what they would do, and this is why you see a lot of these rituals and purifying of, and even having different people come in and out, that they wanted to keep things as clean and pure as possible. So let's go on. Hence, in the ordering of the novice not to touch the pure things of the congregation, the community forbade him all contact with his pots, plates, bowls, and necessarily the food that they held. He was not in effect to attend the common table and had to eat elsewhere. Although the context is very different, a parallel rule in Figures of the Temple scroll, LX 3, prohibited a Gentile woman married to her Jewish carpenter to touch his for 7 years. So, and we also see that in the Torah, that we see that women, if you're going to take a woman, then she has to cut her hair and cut her nails, right? So we see these things, the same things that they had as what they was doing. It's just the way that they kept their community. So we go on just a little bit more. During the first year of the novice, the newcomer would come to share the sex property at a third community inquiry. He was examined for his understanding of the observance of the law, and if his progress was judged to be adequate, he handed over his money and his belongings to the basura of the congregation, but they were set aside and not yet absorbed in the community ownership. During this second year, furthermore, the ban on touching of the pure things was relaxed, but he could still not touch liquids, their drinks. If you're out there in the middle somewhere, your drink is kind of important. You don't want some newbie touching your drinks because he might spit in it. He might just be there, for his own reason, his own purpose, and he might do some terrible things. So you don't want that. You want to make sure that he really wants to be there and he's not just trying to muck up everything. Finally, with the second year over, the novice had once more to undergo an examination, after which, according to the judgment of the congregation, he was at least inscribed among the brethren in the order of his rank for the law and for justice and for purity. Also, his property was brought in with theirs and possessed the right from then on to speak his mind in the council of the community. So from that point, they absorbed what he had, and he was a part of the community. So we see this in very few, but there is some communities that do this today, that they kind of go off the same thing. There's one in Texas that I don't think they hold it for 2 years. I don't think they do what they do here, but there is some people trying to do this, but you have to be careful because it's not always for the right reasons. It's not always because, what they see here. A lot of times we see people trying to absorb, especially in today's world, cars and deeds and lands and things for the wrong reasons. This was that everybody lived the same, everybody had the same. There was no hierarchy that was better than the other than the recognized, and they was because who they were and what they knew, and because of their drove a new camel chariot through the wilderness, right? So a lot of things that we see, again, we can match up to the scriptures, and we can, match up to the Torah, the drinking of the water, the different things that all these scriptures that are relating back to Deuteronomy, Leviticus, the scriptures, it's telling the same thing they're telling. So, like I said in the beginning there, I personally believe that they are a way of the Creator showing that his word was created. He gave it to Moshe, Now get that, because that's what a lot of people said and still try to say, that it's the word of man. It's made by man. If you're going to say that, then you have to go with the 613 commandments, because that was given to Moshe, right? It was put on sapphire stone. It was given to him. And that was what Yahweh, that's, if you go over the Torah, if you go over the books, if you go over the commandments, I believe 248 of the dues. And, that's about right. If you really want to get it down, like you see here, they was taking 1 year and 2 years. And a lot of that's also, I believe, their lifestyle and where they came from. If they knew nothing, I think it was on both sides. It was, do you really want to be here or not? After 1 year of your life, you kind of don't want to play around too much. After 2 years, you're either committed or you're not. So a lot of these things I believe that we see is they was really just, in a way testing them. Do you want to be a part of this congregation or do you not? And they were supposed to hold their things and keep their things until they was actually committed to it. So we will, we will stop right here, I believe. And questions or comments or anything like that, we will go over. If you have anything. Anything on the YouTube? Well, if we don't have any questions or comments, we're going to shut down the live stream. So thank you for listening, for watching. Till next time, may God bless you and keep you. May His kind of shine upon you. May He grant you shalom. Shalom, everybody. Thank you very much for listening, for watching, and for hanging around.